It's Wednesday, June 3rd. This is the Personnel and Policies Ad Hoc Committee meeting. Say here if you're present. Fred Westcott. Dave Kelly.
Here.
John Butita. Dorothy Red.
Present.
Angie Gorel.
Present.
Joe Hoffman. We have two absent. We do have a quorum. Also joining us today is Lorraine Logan and Michael King from Workplace. Mr. Chapman, did we have anybody sign up for public comment tonight?
That's what I did when I
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to agenda item D, in-person interview of candidates. I guess Lorraine or Michael, would you like to just explain to the committee what you had explained to me about the procedure you're recommending for an in-person interview of the candidates?
Sure. And before we start, just please allow me, Mr. Chairman, to say how much we appreciate being able to work with you all on this really critical opportunity with the county. To kick it off during COVID was a little scary. We had no idea just what kind of response we would get, and it did indeed start off slowly, and then it got momentum. And we're happy that today we're able to talk with you about 3 people that we feel are good candidates. We're not far enough into the process to be able to say we've 100% vetted them, because that would be violating an Illinois law. But we do have 3 people to talk about, and in the end, we will also be talking about how we recommend we handle the interview process. So, Mr. Chairman, would you like us to first talk about the candidates, or how we're going to go into the process?
Let's talk about the candidates first.
Okay. Michael?
Well, certainly be happy to give an update since our last conversation in terms of what even just the process. Once we got the position profile approved and posted, it went up on all the industry job boards, the Illinois City County Management Association, National Association, etc. We also got it blasted out to those groups through email blasts and had direct contacts there. It was posted on diversity job boards, aggregate job boards like Indeed, LinkedIn, etc. But really the majority of our recruiting efforts were in direct research and outreach to candidates that we felt matched the profile of what we were looking for. In all, we had 150 prospective candidates that we reached out to, 62 formally applied. And we're going to talk to you today about the 3 that we would recommend moving forward in the process. As the last step of the process, Lorraine and I conducted interviews over Zoom using the position profile as a guide for the key areas for our interview. I want to just briefly, touch on the backgrounds of the 3 candidates, and then Lorraine will speak to next steps and the recommendations. The first candidate is a 20+ year experience as a county administrator in several different counties, 9 years in his current role in a county in Wisconsin. He's served in some larger counties, counties with populations over 800,000 and smaller than Winnebago as well. So he's had experience on both sides of the size spectrum, with smaller budgets and budgets much larger. This is an area that's of real interest to him because of family that's down here. Certainly from a career perspective, he sees this as a real opportunity for him. He has Masters of Public Administration, as well as bachelor's in political science, Spanish, and economics. The second candidate we have.
Would you want to speak about his views of the role?
Sure. He views the role of the county administrator as the one to assist the board in implementing their policies and their visions. This is a quote from him: "I serve as a resource and a sounding board and an expert if needed on certain issues." The notable outcomes that when we asked about the notable outcomes that you can expect from him, he said that an organization that is aligned and working towards a common mission, common goals as outlined by the elected officials, his role is to provide the key leadership to make sure that the work plans of the staff align with the board policies.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The second candidate has 10 years of experience in county government and regional economic development, with 2 years as county administrator of a smaller county in the Northern Illinois area. He's currently in economic development for a larger county than Winnebago County, and seeking an opportunity to move back into the county administrator role. Prior to his government experience, he had 8 years experience in consulting, public and private organizations in the area of finance, economic modeling, grant writing, and strategic planning. He also has experience, budget was a major part of his experience as county administrator, human resources. He views the role of the county administrator as the facilitator of the board, were the words that he used, working with elected and appointed department heads with very specific constitutional powers to make government effective. The notable outcomes that he mentioned were an immediate financial triage and then a focus on medium and long-term financial goals, prioritizing service areas and funding them. He has his master's in business administration and a number of professional affiliations, with local county government and economic development. The last candidate has 20 plus years of experience as a village and city administrator, 6 years in his current village in Southern Illinois. Previous experience also in smaller villages and cities that were connected or were part of a larger MSA, similar to what the Rockford region of Winnebago would be. He also has been in charge of the finance and budget, human resources, union negotiations. He views his role as the county administrator to be the manager and facilitator, facilitating the governing body's vision and managing the employees' implementation of that vision. The notable outcomes that he spoke to were that he would meet with all of the elected officials, department heads, and key stakeholders. He'd work with the board to develop a strategic plan and develop an action plan for the organization. He said, "It's my role to get everyone on the same page." He's interested in this role. He also has family in Rockford, and this would be an opportunity for him to be in a larger organization. Also has memberships in the city county management, the international, the Illinois, the downstate, Government Finance Officers Association, Illinois Government Finance Officers Associations, and economic development. And he also has his Master's of Public Administration.
Before I move to what we're recommending, are there any questions about Michael's comments? All right, we're recommending that you bring all 3 of these, they are men, gentlemen to town, and that it be a 2-step process. We have used this for the library director search that we did as a company, and I was part of it when we brought Chief O'Shea to the Rockford City Police Department. What we're recommending is a meet and greet and then interview process. So I'm going to look very closely at my notes to make sure I cover everything. The finalists will be invited to participate in a structured invitational meet and greet. And we could use a space like the Nordloff Center where each candidate would have a room and the invitees would be invited to mingle through those rooms, and it would give a chance for one-to-one conversation. It would give a chance for elected individuals and other invitees to pose any question that's on their on their mind and get a feel for that candidate's viewpoint. The type of individuals that would be invited in this circumstance would be city mayors or village administrators. The invitation list would be formed with input from Mr. Chapman and Mr. Arena. And this event would occur in the late afternoon of the day prior to the interviews. The purpose is so that the candidates can get a feel for the community, for community leadership, and for the electeds to whom they would report. And it also, as I said earlier, gives each of you a chance to have a one-to-one feel for that individual, ask the things that are really top of mind for you. We, the workplace team, will make sure that people are mingling, that everybody gets a chance to meet all three of the candidates. We will create a comment form where each guest will confidentially report their thoughts and perceptions of that candidate. That information will be culled overnight by us and put into a report for the search committee so they know the kinds of things that are appreciated or of concern about the three people that we have invited to town. The interviews will run 90 minutes and they will be facilitated by us. We recommend, we will structure it so that there is the same set of questions asked of each candidate. That way we know it's equitable and that we are getting the same insight and measurement of each candidate. At the end of the structured interview, there will be a time for each member of the search, or any member of the search committee, to ask a clarifying question. And that is just to go back and tap into anything that you feel was unanswered or unclear. We will provide you, the interview team, with with sheets of paper where you have the question before you. You have plenty of room to take notes. We'll have all that done for you in preparation to make it easier for you. The merit of your not having to sit there and think about being the next person to ask the question is it lets you fully absorb what people say. It lets you watch their critical thinking styles, their presentation styles, and it allows you to observe just their body language and all of that. In our experience, it's a much better way than having to circulate and people thinking about the question that they next have to ask. We would follow the 3 interviews, each 90-minute interview, with a debriefing period. So we're asking the search committee to set aside 6 hours on the day that we'll be involved with this. Of course, there'll be accommodations to be made for the candidates. We anticipate that 2 of the 3 may not ask for hotel accommodation, but I'm just alerting you that it would be a fair expense that you may have to incur. We certainly are going to be prudent in anywhere that we would book lodging, and we'll work with Mr. Chapman to see if you have special rates anywhere and that kind of thing. I suppose there also should be an expectation that we could have some meal allowance. So those are the expenses that you could incur. Michael, I believe that 2 of them probably are automobile rides, and I don't know that we think any will be a plane ride.
Yeah, all 3 will be plane, and I did confirm that I think we will have 2 hotels.
Okay, and you said plane, but I think you meant car.
That's what I meant. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Okay, that is what we wanted to share, and we welcome your questions.
Is there any questions from any committee members?
Yes, Paul. Angie.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Gorel.
Did you have interviews that were from Winnebago County at all?
We had 1 candidate, Mrs. Gorel.
And what was the reasoning for not bringing that candidate forward, since, that person is here? Is it inexperience? Is it knowledge? What is it? Why not someone from here?
lack of direct correlative experience, just nothing in terms of preparedness or knowledge paralleled even closely the three people we're presenting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious, would it be possible, of the three candidates that were mentioned, we heard a lot about those candidates and how they answered questions. Could we have a quick bullet point emailed to us, just what I believe you said, Mr. King and Ms. Logan, could we just kind of synopsis of each of the three? I'm not looking for names or anything, just a brief summary of what was said as far as 20 plus years experience, degrees, relevant knowledge and background. Could we have that snapshot just emailed?
Mr. Arena, I assume that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you send it to me, I'll distribute it to the board.
Glad to. That's a great request, Mr. McDonald.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. Lorraine, I presume the interviews, the meet and greets, limited to 10?
10 people?
At a time.
Correct.
Good catch, Mr. Kelly. Yes, we're going to have to figure out the logistics of how to make sure we only have, I will be surprised if we're given such an extensive list that we can't easily make sure there's never more than 10 people in one space. And the upstairs of the Nordloff is plenty spacious, so I don't foresee that being an issue. But thank you for reminding me of that.
Chairman Haney, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Arena. Lorraine, you mentioned who you would invite to the meet and greet. Could you just re-hit who that is again?
Oh, I said that we would ask Mr. Chapman and Mr. Arena to help us. And I just offered the example, Mr. Chairman, of it would be village presidents, city mayors within the county, you know, all the key stakeholders to the county.
Okay, in addition to county board members or separate, I guess my thing is, would it be like elected officials at the county in addition to mayors? Would it be
Yes.
county board members, elected officials at the county and mayors?
And the constitutionally elected and all that, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. All right, thank you.
Great question.
Dorsey Red here.
Go ahead, Ms. Red, and then Mr. Butita.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Logan, were there any females that applied for the position?
Regrettably, there were not, Mrs. Red. Well, now, wait a minute, Michael, I was not in on all the way back to 100 and whatever it was.
Yes, there were. And one interviewed too as well.
Oh, that's right, I was in on one, forgive me.
Well, I guess my question is, was there one from Winnebago County? A
Yes.
female?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Mr.
My
Butita?
mistake, yes. And I interviewed her.
Are we in a position to set a timetable on when this will happen?
Michael, I think you started to say when they can appear.
Well, they're awaiting this conversation. So I think, Mr. Arena, that the idea was that we would set this up as soon as feasible, given people's schedules and availability of the candidates to come. But they're aware that we're having this conversation, and you know, we'll be available, you know, in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Could it happen as early as next week? Well, next week, how would we do this? We don't want to do it on, we got a county board meeting, don't we? Or do we have county board next Thursday?
Yeah.
I would suggest for travel purposes that it would be, and arranging people's schedules, the week of the 15th. So, and originally we had talked about the possibility of a Friday night and a Saturday from a candidate's perspective, but I'm afraid that won't get great representation from all of the stakeholders that you would like to have come out, that, you know, that a Friday night might not be the best time. So if there's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you know, something midweek would likely be better.
Okay. of the members of this committee, is anyone that week of the 15th, is anyone aware of schedule conflicts or things we would need to work around? Okay. All right, so it sounds like we're flexible. We'll have to check with Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Westcott, but Mr. McDonald, you had a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as scheduling and to Mr. Kelly's point with the COVID and limited group sizes, I would be interested as well in maybe having one time period for county board people or countywide electeds, and then a separate period maybe for other governments that would like to speak to the three. That way we can drill down, maybe have a little bit more personal one-on-one time than to dilute the time with other local electeds rather.
Yes, certainly. And the way that we typically would do that is you have three candidates. They're all there at the same time, meeting with three different stakeholder groups and perhaps even a fourth, and staggering them that way so they can go from room to room. That keeps the size smaller, but it also allows for better interaction with the groups of people.
And to emphasize your point, Mr. McDonald, we can add 30 minutes or something to the reception time so that we're sure that all county board members are going to get their time with each of the three.
Thank you.
And then we'll have to have Mr. Chapman help us to make sure we don't batch people in ways that are, I don't know, violation of committee representation or whatever that all is.
I think as long as we're not talking specific policies, we can meet.
That's open meetings.
Okay.
What, Mr. Chapman, what was that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have a quorum of the county board at these particular meetings, then you're gonna, you have to call it as an open meeting.
Even if we're not discussing any particular policy issue? Because like you can socialize normally.
Well, I would defer to the attorney on that one, but I think it is would have to be an open meeting. But I think
Okay.
Mr. Kalinkas is on. He could maybe respond.
All right.
It is clearly an open meeting.
Okay.
This is hiring a county administrator is county business, period. There's no way you're going to get around that.
Okay. Well, that's fine. That shouldn't be a problem, should it? I mean,
Like,
Mr. Haney's had his hand up. So,
Oh, go ahead.
Did you have some?
Finish. He can finish his comment, and then I'll jump in. It's a separate issue.
Okay, Mr. Chapman, did you have something to
no,
add?
I was just going to say, in terms of confidentiality of the candidates, if it is an open meeting, I presume that names may be, may get out, et cetera. So I don't know what's been told to the candidates, or if we go through this process.
They know that once we finalize our invitation to them to come in on a certain date, they need to be prepared to have their names released.
Okay, good.
I think that we did tell them that. I think that if there were a way to have this be a personnel related and go into closed session, they would prefer that, but certainly that's not always possible, and they're aware of that.
Well, the meet and greet might be an open meeting. Now, the interview, though, that should be permitted to be closed.
Yeah.
Is that correct, Mr. Kurlinkus?
Yeah, you could probably invoke that in there, but the other thing to consider about the Open Meeting Act is that open meetings are not only open, they're open to the public and also the media.
Well, how are we going to manage a meet and greet that's open to the public with the restriction on group sizes with COVID?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's the same question we're trying to wrestle with as people want to go back to to getting away from Zoom virtual meetings and go back to a face-to-face meeting. It's more than just putting the 6 feet of social distancing in and stuff for the county board members. It's also the fact that once you get together and have a physical presence again, that's it. You're back on all of this stuff. You've got to have the public be available. You've got to, you may be able to put them in another room and have them address people, remotely. if they want to do it. But you've got to have all of that made available. So the Open Meeting Act issue, when you come together physically, I think you bring the whole raft of problems back in with that. And so I don't know if there's any way really around that. If you had the county board, a majority of the county board, or a majority of a committee, so on this too. You know, you've got kind of the second hammer coming on this thing is when you have a majority of a quorum of a committee members there, that requires the posting of an open meeting. That's the way it works.
So can the meet and greet be a closed meeting too, to avoid the public being involved to deal with the numbers?
I would say absolutely not.
Absolutely not to the meet and greet?
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, it's going to be a public meeting, and you'd have to come up with what's the exclusion under the Open Meetings Act that you're going to do it with. I mean, you can't say you're conducting interviews of them at all. You're bringing in other people too. You know, when you're bringing in some of the community leaders, other stakeholders of the area, that's I think you'd lose that before the public access counselor.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jaime Salgado, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From my personal, what I've seen in the past, I almost want to assume the meet and greet is really when, you know, the candidate has accepted when we selected someone and we bring in the leaders from the community to do a meet and greet. You know, after the fact, I don't know how comfortable that would be for the three individuals. That's one. And then my suggestion or recommendation would be to essentially have this advisory committee here that's doing the interviewing of the three candidates, the 6 hours from that information, and then, you know, obviously make a sort of recommendation with the county board of some whole in closed session to essentially, you know, when the process is going, and then once that's done, the meet and greet can be done publicly, where we invite, you know, obviously the public and, you know, the local officials to kind of weigh in to kind of, you know, with the new obviously acceptance of the county administrator position. So I don't know if that, you know, that's been my experience in the past, but I mean, I could be wrong that this is entirely, and this maybe is more for a question for Mike or Ms. Logan on that aspect of it, of actually doing the interviewing process of the three individuals, then somehow, you know, a decision's made upon that, and then a meet and greet would be essentially done after that. I know that we want input from across multiple partners on that aspect to kind of vet the individuals to see what's the best fit for all communities / the regional county as a whole. So that's what I'm kind of, you know, thinking out loud here, probably as a suggestion. I don't know if this would, you know, make any sense going that direction, but that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. So I've got Chairman Haney, Mr. Webster, Crosby, and then Mr. Kelly. So Chairman Haney, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Arena. The question I have for Michael Lorraine, are these any of the three candidates applying for other positions to the best of your knowledge? And the only reason I ask is sometimes these processes become public and then it becomes a race because you have a candidate that's vying for more than one job. And I know you might not know all that there is to know about each candidate, but is there any concerns about timing in terms of losing one of the three quality folks that you've brought forward because of circumstances such as that?
Not to my knowledge.
Or my perception.
Good.
That's the follow-up then, Mr. Arena, and then I don't have anything else. I would just say regarding a public meeting with having people do a meet and greet, the earlier you involve partners with the three candidates, it becomes more them helping give feedback and helping shape and inform the selection process in a respectful, meaningful way. If it's at the conclusion, when you're down to one, then it's merely, here's the work we've done, meet the new guy. And I'm not saying there's a good or bad. I'm just saying those are fundamentally different ways to involve our partners, whether it's elected officials or other mayors and such. For whatever that's worth, it'd feel different to our partners regarding which way you all decide to go. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. Let the record show that Mr. Hoffman has joined us as well. Mr. Webster, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. A lot of my concerns were revolving around the issue of the closed sessions when we're personnel issues. We oftentimes go into closed session and that. But as I'm hearing, and so a lot of my concerns were addressed here somewhat. But one of the other concerns I have is, I don't know, I think some of us may have already gotten phone calls from people that have applied for this position. And what I guess I'm concerned about there is if we start going down this road of casting a huge net over everybody that's anybody to participate in this interview or meet and greet process and all this, I can foresee where, once again, we would be getting, as board members, because it's a board decision in the end, but as board members, I can see once again where we would be getting phone calls from outside people from trying to influence our decision from the outside. So, you know, that always kind of, I don't know, that kind of weighs on my mind as well there. Well, in the end, it is strictly a board decision. Thank you.
We could discuss now whether we invite, I think all the board members should have the opportunity to go through a meet and greet, and all of the other county elected officials definitely should be involved. The only question then becomes, do we invite the other mayors and village presidents to come by? And really, how many more people are we talking about? There's what?
That's my concern, Paul. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Crosby, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. This is for Lorraine and Mike. You mentioned earlier, Lorraine, that you were involved with Chief O'Shea. And so in this two-step process that you did with him, how did you work around, or did you work around the Open Meetings Act?
It was, Mrs. Crosby, it was not an issue. We invited all the alders, and several of them came up. I'm trying to be honest with you, it's now almost 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure of my memory, but I guess I think maybe the media was there, Mrs. Crosby. I think the media was there.
I'm sure they were.
I think they were, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
And let me just say, since you've asked me a question, I offer this only, as Chairman Haney said, it promotes buy-in, it promotes goodwill, but it's not necessary if you all see more barriers than return. We're not wedded to it. We're wedded to buy-in, that's all.
Okay. So when you, just a follow-up, so when you did this with the city, it was an open meetings, the press was there. And did we have an influx of people from the community, do you recall?
I remember a lot of people being up there.
Okay, very good, thank you.
But, but again, Mrs. Crosby, it was people who are heavily invested in the well-being of it was not odd for the people who were there, as I remember. I think probably the sheriff came because he probably saw that as a partner he was going to have. So it was
Sure.
It was predictable, well-invested people who were being conscientious about their civic role. I don't remember a lot of private citizens.
Thank you very much.
To the library one, because we did open that one up to all citizens. There was not a large contingent, but the media did come to that. The breakout rooms of the key stakeholders, in that case, there were staff involved as well. Those were closed because those were, even though they were meet and greets, there were questions that were, those feedback cards that we spoke about. So, you know, for the board members, I do think this, you know, even if called a meet and greet, this is a personnel issue. So I think on that, they did close those conversations.
Very helpful, Mike. Thank you. That concludes everything for me, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. I have to echo Chairman Haney's concerns. My experience on the Rockford School Board, and we hired, during my 8 years on that board, we hired 5 different superintendents. I have to disagree with Mr. Salgado's suggestion of having the board hire the person first and then having the meet and greet. That was not how we did it on the school board. Stakeholders deserve to meet the candidates, and even if you don't want to get the phone calls, they're going to call you, and they should, and that's our job.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions?
Yes, there is.
Go ahead, Ms. Squirrel.
Lorraine, when you did it for the police chief, how many recruits did you have at that time for that position?
Oh, heavens, I don't remember at all. How many, you know, because it's a funnel, Mrs. Gorel, it starts.
I understand that, but when it came down right to the nitty gritty with the meet and greet, how many of the finalists were there?
3, and 1 withdrew the morning of, so there were 2 in the building.
There were only 2 in the building. Actually, Jaime is pretty much on target of probably how this should be done. Perhaps on Zoom we can interview the 3 people. That keeps us open to the public, and they can also see them, and the county board people, our members, can then talk to them openly. Once we decide who we would like to have as our new administrator, then we can have a greet and meet, and everyone who wants to come out and meet that person is fine. Because in a meet and greet, they're not going to be the influence on us county board members of whom we are going to choose our new administrator. So the greet and meet should come, I feel, should come after the fact when we get the person. And then we can have everyone come in and say yay, nay, or, you know, they can have their own opinion and get to meet that person. But first, I think county board members should have the privacy, since there's so many of us, that we get to discuss this. And like I say, maybe we can interview them on Zoom and get a feel for all 3 of them. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Wrong button. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry, Angie. That's living in and perpetuating the silos people talk about when you don't get input from everybody else that's related to it. We got to stop perpetuating the silo mentality.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. But on the same token, maybe we should put them on a ballot and let everyone get a vote for them. That's the other option. And we don't want to do that option. We want to be able, being the administrator of this county is a very important job. And as 20 county board members, we should be able to interview them and break it down and see who we truly want as a whole, vote on it, and then let the rest of them come. Thank you.
All right, back to Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you. Follow up. I'm sorry, Angie, I still got to disagree with you. Why wouldn't you want to have input from other people that are going to be affected by this position?
Well, then why are we having them all there?
Uh, could you clarify that question, Ms. Gorel? Having them all where?
Having them all at greet and meets and doing all these interviews. Those interviews should truly be more private. As a person, would you like to go and have all, you have all three candidates there. So all these people are going to come and talk to them, greet and meet. But at greet and meet, actually, they'll be interviewing them just by asking them certain questions and whatever. But I'm going to leave it up to all of you. I'm sorry, I've done this before with the county, and we did it that the county board members, we had people in attendance. Like I say, we could do it on Zoom. But the county board members are the ones who did the interviewing. We did the discussing of this and in a closed meeting, and all of us together, all 20 of us. And that's how we have done it. I don't know, maybe, I guess, I just don't, I like the way we did it, and then you expose that person to everyone.
So let me just clarify what we're talking about here. We're going to have a meet and greet where all 20 of the county board members have the opportunity to interact with the candidates personally and the other elected officials. And then we're going to have an in-person interview conducted by Mr. King, where the 7 members of this committee are present in the room and observe those interviews. And then our next agenda item is to talk about how we make the final selection. So we'll move on to that. But the conversation right now is just this procedure of interaction between all of us and the candidates. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me speak, even though I'm not in this committee. I do want to point this out because I do find this slightly amusing. There's a reason why we used to put this under the purview of the chairman, and that's so the chairman could interview multiple candidates, bring in stakeholders from around the community, as well as certain board members to have those conversations. And none of this would have been followed by Open Meeting Act problems. And it wasn't until the chairman made a final selection and presented to all 20 board members that we could be introduced them to the public and everyone could have that conversation. This is what happens when we try to get 20 people or a committee in a room to interview 3 or 4 or 5 people, that every single one of those interviews has to be part of the, has to be open, and it makes the process last significantly longer.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. As we've been discussing this, I've been thinking it's possible that with 3 rooms going and with enough time that we could stagger the board members' interaction so that we don't have an open meetings violation.
Mr. Arena, that is exactly what the city did. The alders were invited for specific timeframes, and they were chosen because they didn't share committees.
Right. I think we might be able to manage that. And then the actual in-person interview would be a posted meeting, but it would be in closed session so that they can interview privately. So I think we can manage it.
And likewise, we interviewed privately, but we could not vote until we went into open session.
Right. So, Mr. Butita.
There we go. All right. I would like to make the motion then that we proceed with Lorraine's recommendation for the meet and greet, and for Mr. Arena, or Steve to organize it so that we don't violate the Open Meetings Act, and then then also have the closed session interviews the next day. So I move for that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Can I have a second? Second by Mr. Kelly. Any discussion? Is there anybody opposed to the motion? Hearing no opposition, we'll record a affirmative vote for all members present. So so on that aspect of the process, I think we've made a decision. With that, I guess we can move to the next agenda item, procedure for candidate selection. So this was a question that Chairman Haney brought up the last time we were together about, how the final decision should be made. This committee is advisory. So all we're doing is, observing the interview. We don't have the authority to make a final decision. I guess it would have to either be through personnel and policy, or the thought I had was, since all of us are getting the opportunity to meet the candidates, and I think I asked Lorraine if the interviews could be recorded, so even those that aren't present in the room could actually witness their in-person interview. Is that feasible, Lorraine?
Certainly, as long as Mr. Kalinkas says we may, and we will get them to sign off on the candidates to sign off.
Right. So if all 20 of us have had the opportunity to see them, then I thought, what if we had like a ballot where we rank our candidates in terms of our choice? Our top candidate would be the 3, 2, and then 1, and then we could tally those ballots and get a ranking of the people we've interviewed, and then pursue them in that order. One thing for all of us to keep in mind is these candidates have different backgrounds, different levels of experience. There might be a difference in compensation that's sought by the candidates. So we might have a top choice, but not be able to come to terms with that person, and therefore we rank them. That was a thought I had, but I want to hear from everybody else on alternative ideas to do that. If we don't do that, we have to have an alternative way that we make the final selection. Anybody want to weigh in on that, or is that an acceptable procedure? Mr. Vitita?
Oops.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That sounds like a great plan. That moving forward, the consensus of the votes would be with just our ad hoc committee or the whole board?
I thought the whole board. So the whole
Okay.
board has the opportunity to influence the selection.
Good.
Mr. Kelly seems to like it. Anybody else want to offer an alternative idea, or is that acceptable?
Mr. Chairman?
Go, Mr. Kalinkas.
Yeah, I don't know if Mrs. Gorel had a question first, sir, but you take a vote of any kind, whether it's a ballot or a ranking or whatever, that's got to be done in open session, subject to the public. You can't have a collection of ballots and then collect them all up and then count them up and say that's what it is. It's a vote. So you can consider that.
Mr. Arena, if I can jump in here, I'm not in this committee. Thank you. This is a question for Miss Lorraine Logman and our Michael. Is there a way that maybe in order to make the compensation is what their compensation preference would be? Is that a proper way of doing this? Because I know sometimes when the process is occurring, they ask on an application of some sort. I don't know, since this is more of an executive type of position, would this be something that we could ask the individuals what their compensation preference is, so at least we have an idea, not saying that that's going to be the determining decision, but if we feel like, hey, it's worth whatever, it makes the decision potentially a lot easier for us. So I just wanted to ask that question because I know Mr. Arena kind of questioned on that, on the different obviously experience and degree, certification, et cetera, that they might be asking for additional compensation and different levels. So I just wanted to make it more easier, cleaner, and crisper, and seeing if that's a possibility where we could ask for their compensation preference And if it is, you know, a viable option for an executive type level, which this position would be. So I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Michael, did you want to answer it or do you want me to? Mr. Salgado, the law now is that until you have a conditional offer extended, you cannot address compensation. If someone has revealed it to us of their own volition, we are aware of the range they're in right now, but we have not legally been able to ask that. So I would have a lot of reticence about putting too much out there right now about what people's compensation request would be. We need to be very delicate here.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. Lorraine, can we ask them if they have a salary expectation?
We're not supposed to discuss salary yet, Mr. Kelly.
The salary was posted on the position profile. So
they know the range that we have offered.
That was what I was going to bring up, Paul. The county administrator position profile, if you look under compensation and benefits, consists of salary of approximately 140,000 DOE and full benefit packages. I mean, it spells out the whole thing, and I'm sure they all got a copy of this, did they not? All your that when you did your interview, I'm assuming they got a copy of this.
That's correct.
Where it is spelled. Michael just said it. Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Kurlinkus. So if we want to allow all the board members to have some input in ranking our preference of candidates, can I compile that information individually outside of an open meeting? Not necessarily assigning this ranking to any individual board member, just so that I can report to the board of these three candidates, this is how the preference of the board members played out.
I think you're kind of making a distinction without a difference, or vice versa on that. You're voting on these people. You're whether they're voting for a candidate or ranking or whatever, the county board is going to take action, and going around individually and collecting them and putting them together isn't any different than having the group meet together and say, you know, how many vote for candidate number one, how many for two, how many for three. I think you'd be subject to some very stiff questioning on the Open Meetings Act on that.
Okay, well, at that point, we've already conducted the meet and greet, we've conducted the interviews. Is there really a problem with us doing that type of a ballot in an open meeting? I mean, what would be the downside of it?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, I mean, is there any negative to it?
I don't know that there would be a downside of it at all, except for the fact that your conversation, your discussion would be in open. You know, remember the Open Meetings Act just gives you exceptions that you can go into closed session for. It doesn't say you have to. You can conduct every meeting with every topic that you have in open session.
Right.
The Open Meeting Act exceptions just give you some a very limited number of exceptions where you may, should you choose, adjourn to executive session to discuss those. So,
right. So if we want to debate the merits of the individual candidates as a full board, we could do that portion, that conversation, in closed session, so we're not openly making critical comments about people, but then go into open session to do the ballot for the selection, right?
That should be all right. Again, you know, it's we talked a little bit. I know you and I had a conversation about the ability to adjourn and do the interviews in closed session, and that I think you can, in good faith, do that. you know, as you're deciding who you're going to bring out on, the key is you can't come to a consensus in closed session. I mean, that would be my recommendation, is not to do that, because that is tantamount to a vote in closed session, and all you're doing is coming out and ratifying that vote in open session. So you've got, it's a narrow line there that you have to be careful on.
All right, so strictly debating the merits of the candidates would be in closed session, but any type of the voting or that would be an open session.
Yeah.
Mr. Arena?
All right, hey, I got Mr. Kelly and then Mrs. Goro.
Come on. Thank you, Chairman. We took paper straw polls all the time on the school board when we were trying to select a new superintendent. A paper straw poll is not a meeting. And collecting those and to help us form an opinion about who our collective best choice is has never been challenged.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kelly. If we can verify, I mean, that sounds like the best way to move forward, but one way or another, we'll work around it. Ms. Goro and then Mr. Vitita.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. First of all, the ad hoc committee, when we do these interviews, all we do is a recommendation to the Personnel and Policy Commission committee. They then bring forward a recommendation to the whole board. This is the way we've been doing it. So apparently we haven't been doing it right, because our job is only to make the recommendation. And if I'm wrong, someone needs to correct me.
I don't think there's a wrong or right to that. The only reason we're having this discussion is because Chairman Haney brought up the point of, you know, all 20 of the board are going to be voting on this. So
absolutely.
All 20 of the board might want to have some say in who that final selection is. And I thought the ranking would give us all an opportunity to weigh in. It was just an alternative way of doing it. Did you have a follow-up, Ms. Goro?
I'm just going to let all of you decide, and then I'll decide what I want to do, because it's coming into more confusion than it should be. All I'm saying is the ad hoc committee is the one who makes the recommendation to the policy and personnel committee. They give that to the chairman. The chairman then brings the recommendation to the floor, and everyone votes on it. I do understand what you're saying about everyone should have the right to be there at an interview. I don't have a problem with that. They probably should be. But when it comes right down to it, we're the ones who make the recommendation, and we can do that with the advice of whoever comes to the meeting for the interviews. We can find out from them and then make our own choice of who we're going to bring that recommendation to the committee, who will be, you know, who we will bring to the recommendation to.
Okay.
But that's,
well,
you know, I'm just going to stay out of it now. You're all going to have to do it, and Mr. Kalinkas is the one that's going to have to watch us like a hawk.
Okay. Mr. Vitita, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if we couldn't, in order to accommodate the entire board, ability to do some composite voting and ranking of these three candidates, once we're in open session, can we not vote on candidate A, B, and candidate C? Is it necessary to associate a name with them? I guess that's to Mr. Kalinkas.
Well, you can you can do that. I don't. Are you suggesting referring to them as candidates A, B, and C, so that you don't have a discussion about any of the specific, I guess, qualities or qualifications of the candidates in open session, so that they can be identified?
Yes, well, that's correct. I mean, in closed session, the merits of all the candidates will be discussed amongst the county board members in open session. If we want to rank the candidates and have a composite voting of all 20 members, it seems to me in open session, we could do it candidate A, B, and C without the names. And would that violate an open meeting act?
I don't think so, but again, part of the thing is how are you going to, and I guess this is what I'm kind of missing on right now. How are you going to get that recommendation on the board floor as to who you want? Are you gonna, is that gonna be after you've ranked candidates A, B, and C? And if B comes out on top, then that's who's moved forward on it. You want your discussion, and again, I think you can discuss qualifications and so on in closed session, but what you have to be careful of is, again, coming out of closed session with saying, okay, all those, I move that we do candidate B, and then everybody vote on candidate B, because certainly the appearance would be that you voted in closed session and now you're just simply coming out and ratifying the action that you took. So yeah, it's very important. I'm glad you're having this discussion, because I think it's very important for you all to think about the process that you want to wind up with, because again, I guess if you started at the end of the process and say, okay, how does the question get before the board on the board floor at a board meeting? That I think would be important, and then work your way back from that.
Okay. So this part of the conversation, we don't have to make a final decision today. We could do a little research. Mr. Kelly brought up the point of having done the straw polls in the past and other boards, and it was fine. So maybe we need to get a little clarification, put a little bit more thought into this. If we reconvene this committee next week and make a final decision on how to make the final selection, we'll still be fine. We can still move ahead with getting our meet and greet and interviews together. I got Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Logan. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. What was I going to say now?
We'll come back to you, Mr. Kelly. Lorraine?
I want to be certain that you're remembering that this is a process and it's based in best practices. And you're going through an investment of time and capital to make sure you get the best candidate. And to just move from they're here to you're voting without really being present to the interview or looking at the recordings of the interview without making knowledgeable decisions is not what you want to be about. The way we're going to end up with the product that has the best chance of being successful is that we really stay in process. There should be, by the time you get to that board floor, there should not be consideration of 3 people.
Right.
Step should narrow it.
Okay.
And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to respect the process.
Okay. Mr. Webster, then Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Logan. I appreciate what you just said, and that is very important. When this name finally comes forward and hits the board floor, the decision should already be made. There shouldn't be any more discussion than on the board floor, really, or really very little. The minds should be made up prior to this hitting the board floor. And so what I'm wondering about this is to kind of move things along a little bit smoother. Is there any way that, because you have all of the information in front of you now, Ms. Logan and Mike, where we are, there you are. You guys have all the information from these 3 that you chose right now. would it be fair, or is there any possible way that those information that you garnered from these people, could that information be shared with us now, redacting their names, redacting any of their background about where they had 17 years of experience at in this experience or that experience, whatever, and all of that could redact anything that indicates who they are or where they're from. So we don't have any, I don't know, preconceived notions. We're just looking strictly at their qualifications. Is that something that could be shared with all of us beforehand?
I think the profile that Mr. McDonald requested and Mr. Arena said he will send out, we'll get those out to you, if not tonight, tomorrow. And that should be quite helpful. And I think then if people have specific questions they want to come back to Mr. Arena with, we'll try to delve into getting you those answers.
Yeah, I think that would be perfect. And like I said, if you want to cross out all the names and all that stuff, redact all that, just say candidate number 1, candidate number 2, candidate number 3, what have you. I think that would be fine. I don't know how the other board members feel about this, but I think that would give us an insight ahead of time before we have this mass meeting.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're settled on the meet and greet process, the interview process. I think what we have 2 options I think we've discussed today about the final selection. One is a ranking process done by the full board. And then Ms. Gorel's suggestion that the ad hoc committee is making a recommendation to personnel and policy, and personnel and policy is then bringing one name forward to the full board for approval. Those are 2 options that we've discussed today. Other ideas might come up. Why doesn't everybody think about it? And we'll reconvene the ad hoc committee next week and make a final decision on on making that final selection, and then move forward from there, unless somebody else has further discussion that they want to have tonight. Any more questions or comments? Mr. Kelly? You're still muted.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm having trouble with my space bar on my Surface. The paper straw poll we were talking about, all board members should participate in that, and it would be advisory to the whole board. And then we inform the whole board as to what the results are. And then a name is brought forward, nominated, and we vote on it. If that fails, number 2. That's how it should go.
Right. That sounds good to me. Then everyone's getting a chance to have some influence over the selection. I like that. So what we need to do is check with the Attorney General's office, make sure that we're not violating any open meeting regulations, and then if that's okay, then we'll formalize that procedure at our next meeting. Lorraine or Michael, any other comments or things that you want to bring up?
No.
Okay. All right, if there's not, Mr. Butina?
Motion to adjourn then, sir.
I have a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second? Second by Mr. Kelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Take that as a yes from all. Thank you for a great meeting. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Arena.
Thank you for participating, Michael and Lorraine.
Hey all, how you guys doing?
Great.
We'll give it a couple minutes and then we'll get right back to it. Are we ready? Okay.
Yep.
I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Economic Development Committee. The date today is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020, and the current time is 6:41 p.m. I'm going to go through individually roll call here. I myself, J.S. Billich, is present. Dorothy Red. I see that she is present, I believe.
Present.
All right. Paul Arena. Paul Arena just got back.
Here.
All right. John Butita.
Here.
Gene Crosby.
Here.
Dan Fellers. Dan was with us, but it looks like he's not anymore. All right. And Bert Girl.
Here.
Tim Neighbors.
Here.
And Fred Westcott. And Fred Westcott is absent. We have 2 absent. All right, and moving on to the next order of business, I'm looking for a motion for the approval of minutes for the April 9th, 2020 and May 20th, 2020 Economic Development Committee meetings.
So move.
Motion by Ms. Crosby and a second. Second by Mr. Neighbors. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
That passes. We're moving on to public comment. As I see that I don't believe that we have anyone in the public for commenting on that. We're going to move past that section and move on to the matter of business of resolution approving annual recommendations for fiscal year 2020 host fee allocations to date. And I'm looking for a motion. Motion by Mr. Girl. Second by Mr. Neighbors. All right, in discussion. I guess I'll pass it on to Chris to kind of describe it a little bit. He did email all of us the list if anybody had a chance to look it over. This is the annual host fees that we've given every year in regards to almost every year in regards to these organizations. They come out of the annual host fees, but we have to approve them every year, and we do give them annually. Chris can kind of describe them a little bit more. Chris, you want to describe them a little bit?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday afternoon, I'd sent out some supporting document that has the 9 items that were listed. These are items that have been paid through host fees for at least the last 3 years, generally speaking. The operations of the water system, that wasn't necessarily paid out in 2017 from host fees with $0, but it might have been covered by projects or came from another fund. But that's something that's a reoccurring cost. And if you look how it's, a lot of these numbers are depleting year over year, or at least for this year. UWI extension and 4-H, Winnebago County Health Department for continuing the demolition program. The annual membership for Region 1 Planning Council is on there. The Land Conservation District, Winnebago County Land Conservation District, Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful, Severson Dells, Winnebago County has some internal capital, and then the United Counties Council of Illinois. These are just basically the base foundation of awards that have been given year over year. There are others, but these are the base ones that we typically do, and the organizations have really come to count on these year over year, or as far as covering costs for the county. The amounts are on the right side if you did review that sheet that I had sent out. But these are the base ones, and if other ones come forward, they can come one-on-one or however the committee sees fit. At the bottom, I did include other host fees expenditures that we have done for projects, but this is only for fiscal year 2020. So like, for example, Est Wing came out, it was approved by the board in November of, I apologize, the memo was wrong. I got it November 26th of 2020, but it was really 2019. Same with the Village of Pecatonica. That was this past December of 2019, not 2020. But then there's the nonprofit organization support by board members, RAMP, One Collaboratives, and then the RLDC to kind of give a little bit of an overview of the annuals. This does not include the multi-year commitments. It's just the annuals that we do on seem to do on a normal basis. This had kind of been put together by Chairman Haney, Economic Development Chairman, Mr. Billich, and then the administrator, Steve Chapman, and myself had worked on this a couple months. Well, I guess it was February-ish. And then with the COVID, it kind of got stalled a little bit, but that's kind of what's before you.
All right, thank you, Chris. And yeah, like you mentioned, with the COVID, we decided to actually hold off a little bit. We were trying to get the county situated with all the COVID stuff. So now we actually get a chance to attack this and move forward with business. I don't know if you have noticed, the amount that we are doing this year is less than prior years. We did have a request though, however, from Severson Dells did want to go back up to their 50,000, but we're still set at that 25,000. I will discuss at length with them if it is necessary, if it's something after we see our budget and how the budget looks, if it's something that we can swing for them, if that is still something that they would like to request. Other than that, I got nothing else to add on. I'm going to go forward to Gene Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Walk me through the 80,000 for the extension and 4-H Winnebago County. Tell me about that.
Chris, can you give a bit of information on that? I do see that, I don't see, oh, Steve's actually here as well. Chris or Steve know a little bit more on that one for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve might be able to chime in too, but that was just what had been done in previous years. And so that was at the time of being discussed that it was felt that that would just stay the same.
And in previous years, why did we give them 80,000?
May I chime in on that?
Yeah, help me, Angie, help me.
Laura, go ahead.
Well, I'd love to. First of all, the reason we give them 80,000, in fact, we give them less than Stevenson County does, because what we give them 80,000, the state of Illinois, or Illinois University gives them 80,000 too. You have to see all the things that they do. They even do a lot of teaching classes after hours in our schools. They are spread all over. They work with diabetic people they work with farming. They work with, it's such a vast agenda that they have. It's unbelievable. And because it serves all of Winnebago County, and this extension is through, we're an extension of the University of Illinois. And we've never raised it. We just keep it there just to help them meet their budget. But they do get 80,000 also will be matched from the University of Illinois for this program. It reaches out, there are 5 counties that are involved in it, but each county puts in their own share, and that share is done for that county. Our share is done for our county. What else you need to know, Gene?
That's a good start, but
it's you have no idea how many people in Winnebago County it services, even in Rockford, Illinois. They even have a leadership for young people so that they can learn to go on and be leaders in our community. At West Middle School, they teach robotics to the students after hours. They are very, very involved in our community. They're the silence that you don't ever hear about. I'd be happy to get you brochures on it. I'm a trustee. Jim Webster's a trustee, and so is Aaron Booker. And if you really want to know, talk to Aaron Booker and talk to Jim Webster, because with both of them, I cover the city, they cover the south and the north of our county, and they can give you a whole list beyond me. It's very well ran. They stay within their budget. That just, I don't know, I can't explain how I am so impressed with all the work they do. People who are on the SNAP program get lessons. They go out, Carol, can't think where her last name goes, she goes out to like Rockford Housing, all the different projects, and teaches them how to do good cooking, healthy cooking, and still stay on their SNAP program, within their SNAP program, I should say, for the funding of their food.
Thank you, Angie. I just want to make a note, Chris, if you can make a note, Mr. Fellows did join the meeting as well.
And Angie.
Yes.
And Angie, I thank you for your input and I greatly appreciate it. Chairman Haney raised his hand and I'd like to hear from him as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Haney. Chairman.
Mr. Billick, that okay? So thank you, Mr. Billick. I was just going to add to what Angie said. This is one of the few things we do as a county for the rural part of the county. So if you look at all of the host fee, a lot of our multi-year host fee, the way in which they benefit the entire county is that we have people who benefit from different partnerships. They live somewhere, but they benefit from a partnership like Reclaiming First. I've come to become a huge fan of this over the last 3 years. I think it's critical that the county continue this support. If we didn't have a host fee fund, I think we should, as other counties do, pull from it from their general fund. In many counties throughout the state that do not have a host fee fund actually fund their extension just through a different funding mechanism. The relationship between extension and a county is not specific to this region. It actually, my understanding is it happens all over the state. We're just had the luxury of the host fee fund, so it shifts it out of the general fund. Maybe somebody can correct me on the history, but we do not help our rural parts of our county in the number of ways in which we found partnering opportunities in more of our urban or even suburban parts of the county. Some of our partnerships in Rockford, for example, do benefit the whole county, and that's good. And those partnerships maximize impact. But in this case, in the Water and Conservation District, it is very specific to helping our farming community. I can't speak to that at an expert level, of course, but I've come to appreciate the importance of that and in the need for us to not miss the few opportunities we have. But thank you for the floor, and I'll give it back.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm going to jump to
I just want to say, hang on. I just want to say that I thank you for Angie's input. I thank you for the chairman's input, and I totally support the 80,000. Nice job.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. And next, moving on to Mr. Webster first, and then we'll move on to Mr. Arena. Go ahead, Mr. Webster. And then Bert, I got you after that.
There. Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, nice comment, Jane. Anyways, thank you, Angie, for weighing in on this, and thank you, Chairman, for weighing in on this. Don't realize is the U of I Extension administers over 100 different programs, and most of those programs deal with city projects. Angie mentioned the cooking classes and so forth they do. And so they teach nutrition. That's just one of the over 100 different projects. And so the folks that don't have much access, we call them the food deserts and that, a lot of these are geared towards people that need to learn how to take care of their families and so forth, and need to learn some nutrition and some health and so forth. And it's geared towards them. So many of these projects are. People think of U of I Extension just being 4-H. Well, it's a whole lot more than that. They think 4-H only deals with people on the farm, and they're totally wrong. So I just wanted to add that and thank Angie and thank the chairman for weighing in on that.
Thank you, Mr. Webster, Mr. Arena, and then Mr. Girl after that. And then Mr. Neighbors, I got you after that one. Go ahead, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a comment and then a question. You'd mentioned that Severson Dell's Education Foundation had requested to be back up to the 50,000. I did have the opportunity to go out there on a tour. I was impressed with the program that they have and the work that they do. So, Mr. Billich, I would encourage you to have them come in and maybe present to this committee, their reasoning for needing the other $25,000, and perhaps in the future we could allocate that. And then my question is, explain to me the operation of the water system, the Baxter Road. So the dollar amount there fluctuates. What is that water system? Is it ours? And what is the reason that the money we've allocated year to year has varied so much?
It is one of our projects, but I know that that's been going on. I would actually refer to Chris or Steve to explain that one out a little better than I can. Go ahead, Chris, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Baxter Rock 39, the county invested money into redevelopment that area down there. So there's a water tower out there. And then the infrastructure for the water systems. There's not enough tenants currently to offset the cost. So there's normal maintenance and upkeep that has to be done until there's enough tenants and hookups. We do with the initial hookups, like when Burner Foods came in a few years back, FedEx, you do get initial hookup fees. So you get quite a decent sum of money from those, but those are 1 year costs and it just goes off of usage. So the usage, while it generates money, it's still not enough development that's occurred down there to offset the ongoing operation costs. But the county highway department typically oversees that.
Thank you, Mr. Dornbush. Does that answer your question, Mr. Arena? Okay, Mr. Girl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wondering, and I was trying to throw my hand up right away, if Mr. Dornbush could email that list of the annuals over to my Gmail account. I looked through it. I don't see it anywhere.
Mr. Girl, I can send that to you.
That would be perfect. And just to follow up, 2 other points. I just want to echo Mr. Arena and what he said with Severson Dells. They do great work out there. I think we all had a chance last year to get out there before all the craziness set in and just see exactly what they do for the community, the educational programs and the environmental programs that they offer. So I would support helping them as much as we can, if that means bringing them back in to have a conversation and just to hear from them. I would appreciate that. And the third thing, and I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if you've had an opportunity about our conversation the other day with YAVO, the Youth Against Violence group. That was a group that we supported 2 years in a row, and I just love to see that continue. They do great work. Unfortunately, they don't get the support that other nonprofits like Phantom Regiment gets. So they have a tough time. And really, other than the money that they put in out of their own pockets, the county is really the backbone to that organization. And I feel if we don't support them, we will lose that organization. They will go somewhere else. So any help that you could do, Mr. Chairman, would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Girl. And actually, if you could reach out to them, I'd love to sit down with you and them as well, especially now that we can sit outside and then enjoy a conversation. Just let me know when you'd like to meet. You had your hand up as well?
Say that, yeah, I had the same question as Mr. Arena on Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful on payout fluctuations.
Yeah.
On that.
I can actually answer that a little bit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you have more to that question?
That's it.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Mr. Neighbors. I apologize. Yeah, no, with that one, they actually, so again, they were set at a certain amount that they got annually. It did change. I don't know if there was other conversations that went with it. Maybe it was just budgeting and what we had going on at the time. I do know that they both reached out to me. I will actually expand on the Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful. They're actually been in operation. They actually save us a lot of money. I did email you. I did email everyone an actual email, a summary of how much actually they do in regards to what they do for the county. And if we don't have them on board doing what they do, we would actually end up having to absorb the cost and having staff that does what they do, and we'd have to pay our staff. Annually, Mr. Dornbush and I talked about it. They do save us close to about $300 and something thousand by them being the recycling source that we go to, that the city also uses as well. But they are looking to also expand into a next area. They are struggling. They struggle to keep their costs at times, but they are actively trying to expand their area. And when we show them enough support, when they have their fundraisers, it encourages other members to try to get closer to matching our grant to them as well. Other than that, I know that on the Severson Dells portion of it as well, they had a similar similar way that they dealt with that as well. With having our support, it's obviously allowed them to keep operating at the optimum level that they have. Bit more in regards to funding to get back to that level that they used to have it at, because it actually did encourage other funding sources to give them more, and they've seen a little bit of a drop in their funding sources from the fundraisers. So, and that's the only part that I know in that regard. Mr. Dornbush, you want to expound on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to touch base a little bit with the Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful. The city of Rockford they continue to run the program, but about 3 years ago, the state changed it. So it's the county's responsibility to take care of some of these recyclables. TVs, there used to be a big site on South Main by the mobile gas station, and then mobile gas station chose not to do it, but the city was putting several hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. This program assists the county because now it's required that the county is responsible for it. So it assists, while we do give them some funds for it, it assists offsetting our cost for the recycling of TVs. Otherwise, what was happening, the public works for city of Rockford and the county highway department picks up a lot of the old, especially the old tube TVs and other electronic devices, printers, and they do, KNIB does a lot of other items, other services as well, but it basically will help lower some of the cost that the county would potentially have to incur without them. And they service the whole community. They have 2 sites, and they're looking to get a 3rd site in the upcoming year for recycling to make it. Right now they have one on South Alpine. The other one is going in the village of McChesney Park at the Bear recycling facility. It's been a little slowed to my understanding. I think more so because of the COVID, and they got through their zoning issues, and now they were originally looking at a 3rd site in the northern part of Winnebago County to try to hit some of those residents up there. But now they, in recent months, they've been talking about potentially putting one out towards Winnebago and Peck to try to assist the residents out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dornbush. I did have Mr. Kelly up first, and then we'll go back to you, Ms. Crosby. Mr. Kelly, go ahead.
I have a question when I'm.
Ms. Red, I'll go. I'll get.
Chairman, can I jump in when?
Yeah, let's get Mr. Kelly, and then Dorothy.
I think I had the floor, Mrs. Red. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Mr.
Regarding the water system, that's there as part of the Rock 39 industrial park development that previous boards decided to start. I don't think I ever would have voted for it. There's lots of shovel-ready stuff all over the county. But regardless, we've got it, and it costs money to maintain it. And we got to maintain it. And the solution to resolving the cost is to fill it up. We only got a couple of businesses out there. And every business helps with their between their connection charges and their consumption, but we've got very little out there right now.
All right, and go ahead, Ms. Crosby, and then we got you, Ms. Red, right after that, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support keeping Northern Illinois beautiful. Without these dollars, guys, they won't survive. And if we want to provide this kind of service to our community, they need to have our support. So I'm going to vote in favor of this, because that's the only place that people can go to dump their TVs and everything else. And it is a needed service. And without us, they won't survive. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Ms. Red, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure if I heard you mention, where are they picking up the old TVs, or where can you take them, on the west side or the southwest side of Rockford?
Actually, so yes, so currently KNIB only has one location. They do operate within a shoestring budget, and they've been trying to expand their office as well. They were looking at a location on the northern part of Illinois, because they are so far on the southern part of, northern part of the Rockford region, since they are so far in the southern part of Rockford region. They are off of Harrison Avenue, or I'm sorry, they're off of, that would be Alpine, just past Harrison on the south side. I don't know what their plans on are expanding to the west side per se. I do know that they had a location where they were getting a deal, being that they were a not-for-profit and being that they do what they do, they did have a location that somebody was helping them, an investor was helping them get in the Loves Park, McChesney Park area as well. So I don't know. I can ask the question, and I'll be sure to ask that question next time I speak with them.
Okay, and we need them to come to this side of town, southwest or the west side.
Understood, Ms. Red.
Thank you.
Mr. Girl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo Mrs. Red's comments. I worked on the west side for years and years, and it seems like a lot of the folks over there like to just recycle things off of Horace and Cunningham in the fields. We really need an option for people on the west side who can recycle things instead of just throwing them out and just causing more pain and more cost to the city and the county to pick this stuff up. So really, I understand they're not for profit, but if we can maybe team up with some other governments and try to help out, the west side to have an option over there, that'd be great. At least have a conversation with them, please.
Oh, definitely we'll have that. Thank you, Mr. Girl. Definitely we'll have that conversation. And in regards to that, I will actually also, they did want to be at the $50,000 range. Maybe we can actually encourage as part of a next contribution, if we do it with them, if they want to meet that $50,000 range, to actually have that discussion as well as a possibility, giving it towards their expansion towards the west side. Okay, and do I have any more questions? Mr. Arena, did you have your hand up again? No, okay. Any other questions? With that, I'm looking for a vote on this. Is there anyone opposed to this resolution?
No.
Seeing none, we will cast a yes vote for everyone. Moving on to other matters or new business. Anybody have anything that they'd like to discuss? Mr. Dornbush, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to touch base. At the last meeting, there was some questions regarding host fees. And the host fees are in a separate account. They're not grouped in. I know that was one of the questions, and I did reach out to the treasurer's office and look in about investing. And they actually, while that's their area of expertise, investing in the county's funds, they already do invest the general funds and all funds of the county. There's not a huge rate of return on it. Currently, the investments, I think, are, from what the treasurer's office said, this was last week when I spoke to them, it's 0.05%. So they're pretty low. So even if you were to diverge some money over, it's really not making much from talking with them. And there's statutory limitations of how the county can invest the funds. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dornbush. Anybody else? With that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I got a motion by Mr. Girl, seconded by Mr. Neighbors and Mr. Fowlers. All those in favor? Aye.
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 All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.